What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, in this video, I want to do a movie review of The Irishman. This has been a much anticipated movie since last year. It was talk about um, Martin Scorsese doing a project talking about Frank Sheehan and having some of the heavyweights in cinema of the past 30 to 40 years and more teaming up, a dream team. And I love movies. Um, I think Martin Scorsese is one of the most brilliant directors of the past 50 years. I think some of the best directors, best filmmakers out there over the past several decades have been guys like, well, first of all, you want to give an homage to somebody like Alfred Hitchcock. I think he was brilliant, what I'm saying, and had so much influence over the modern filmmakers. But I think, like, when you think of the best directors in the modern era, you think about Scorsese. Of course, you think about Steven Spielberg. You think about uh, uh, who else do I want to say? John Singleton. Quentin Tarantino is my favorite. You know what I'm saying? He's my favorite. John Lucas, of course. John Hughes, a little bit, lower tier, I guess, as far as like, but he had a great string of '80s movies. He passed away years ago. I would put John Landis up there, and he is a great director, but I don't like John Landis because I didn't like what happened in the. I don't like, number one, the rumors I've heard about him being a hard ass, and if you're not familiar with what happened in Twilight Zone movie with him, that's the same movie where Vic Morrow, the actor, was killed along with some kids that should not even been on the set, and they were killed in a helicopter crash. They were basically two of the actors were decapitated. One of them was crushed by the plane. The plane that fell, the helicopter, excuse me. And that film led to much more stringent child labor laws when it comes to working in films. And I think literally John Landis got away with murder. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not fond of him at all. But let me get off my soapbox for a second and talk about this film. Um, the movie runs 3 hours. It runs 3 hours long, but you don't feel like it's running that long. It's sort of like the same feel, I guess, when you watch like movies like The Avengers. These movies run very long, but it doesn't feel like it. In this movie, if you're a fan of Martin Scorsese cinema, then I'm pretty sure you're gonna like this film. It's one of these films that you're gonna want to watch over and over again to get a better feel of everything that's gone down in the movie. I don't want to give away too much, but basically the film centers around Robert De Niro's character, whose name is Frank Sheeran. And Frank Sheeran was basically an associate to the Italian mob, but he was actually a well respected and high ranking associate. I have to keep emphasizing associate because, of course, in the mafia, in the Italian mafia, you can't be a member unless you're fully Italian or Sicilian blood. But because of his association with Joe Pesci's character, whose name is Russell Buffalino, and he was a well-respected mafia chieftain. Because of his association with him, Frank Sheeran was in essence a high-ranking member, well, a high-ranking associate. I'll put it like that. And but anyway, the film touches on the theory, and over time, it's become a more highly accepted theory. It's not a fact though, but the theory is, and Frank Sheeran confessed to. Uh, it's common knowledge. I can't really sit there and just lie like, oh, wait till you watch the film. Frank Sheeran confessed to killing Jimmy Hoffa. Okay, so the film goes on that premise. It's kind of set up a little bit. I'll put it like this: the way it's set up is a little bit like Hoffa, where the scene, like when you start off, the movie's set up in 1975, but as the story progresses, it's an ongoing story from the 50s through catching up to the present, which is what the film starts at the time, which is the present. All right, and then the future picks up. The film picks up after that and goes from 1975 through the early 2000s, which were the last years of Frank Sheeran's life. But like I said, I don't want to give away too much. But uh, Joe Pesci, to me, had the strongest performance in the movie. And to me, the reason why he had the strongest performance in the movie is I think Russell Buffalino may have been the hardest to capture as far as his personality. It's kind of hard to capture somebody, this is just my opinion, who is quiet, unassuming, which is against the Joe Pesci type. We all know Joe Pesci is this loud. We always have this, whenever anyone imitates Joe Pesci, they think of Tommy from Goodfellas or Nick Santoro from Casino. That's the typical Joe Pesci character, you know what I'm saying? But he's not like that in this movie. He's very subdued. He's very low key. He talks a lot quieter. He speaks quiet, unassuming. But at the same time, you get the very impression that if anything, this man is even more ruthless than Tommy and Nick if you rile him. And all you gotta do is look at his facial expressions. In this movie, Joe Pesci talks with his eyes and his facial expressions. And you can look at him and tell when he's about to uh, do something bad to somebody. I'll put it like that. When something bad about to happen to somebody, you can just look at his facial expressions. It's a different performance. Uh, Robert De Niro, I think, does an excellent job of portraying Frank Sheeran. I'm a little bit familiar with Frank Sheeran. I remember reading about Frank Sheeran when he was still alive, and I remember when the book came out and when he passed away. I think it was like 2002 or something like that, or 2003. But I think he does a really good job of portraying Frank Sheeran. Frank Sheeran was not a emotional individual. He had a poker face, um, and it's hard to read him. I think even Jimmy Hoffa's character said something like that. It was hard to read Frank Sheeran, so he made an excellent hitman. You know what I'm saying? You couldn't really see nervousness in him, uh, anxiety. You really couldn't tell that from his face. Um, and it's good to see Robert De Niro in a movie where, uh, you know, I mean, you can make the argument that since the early 2000s, De Niro's been kind of cashing it in. You know what I'm saying? He's been doing movies for checks, kind of like the same way Marlon Brando did toward the end of his life. He was kind of disillusioned with Hollywood, and he was basically just doing movies for paychecks. We knew what he was capable of doing. You know what I'm saying? But he was just doing movies. Hey, you want to pay me $10 million to do this C-level work? Fine, I'll do it. But when you present De Niro with A plus material, you're gonna get A plus acting from him. And Al Pacino, I think out of all the three septuagenarians, and I'll get into that in a moment, the age factor. I think he's the most in shape, and he was the one that had the most believability as far as portraying Jimmy. Because in this movie, you see these individuals from the 1950s onward, so they age. And I thought that Al Pacino had the most energy. He's the only one that really brought like some energy to the movie, to his character. The other ones, how can I say this? Like One, well, before I get into that, Al Pacino, I think, did a terrific job portraying Jimmy Hoffa. I still think the best portrayal of him was Jack Nicholson. But at the same time, Jack Nicholson had an advantage, and that was being relatively young still. I think when he did Hoffa, that came out in 92, so Jack would have been 54, 55 years old at the time, so he was still a relatively young man. And that's one little thing that hurts their performance a little bit, is their age. You can see their age was catching up with them a little bit in this movie. And the thing about this movie is that this movie had a tremendous budget that Netflix, you know, to their credit, took up. I want to say the movie, the budget was like maybe $200 million, and a lot of that had to do with the effects that they used to de-age the characters because the movie starts off in the mid 1950s when Frank Sheeran is like in his mid 30s, late 30s. Russell Buffalino at the time was about 50. Jimmy Hoffa was in his mid 40s or so, early to mid 40s. Uh, Even with the de aging, which isn't that distracting to me, um, but even with the de aging, you could see that De Niro doesn't move like a 30-year-old man. And I think the the weakest scene in this movie is when he finds out that a local grocer or grocery store owner put his hands on his daughter, right, in the store. And the beating that he gives the man, this was no Jimmy Conway beating, right? This ain't no vintage 1970s De Niro beating. He looks stiff and he looks old, all right? And don't get me wrong. You got to give credit to De Niro to be able to do what he did at age 78. But I think they should have used a body double and maybe simulated his face on because it wasn't believable at all. You know what I'm saying? And in those scenes when they're trying to portray men who are young and bigger, that kind of isn't as believable. Now, Buffalino, on the other hand, was considerably older than them, and even when the film starts off, he's like 50. So, and plus, he wasn't the most wild man of characters anyway. So, as De Niro starts off, as Pesci starts off at the film being about 50 and gets older, his performance is the most believable and solid. Um, I think De Niro did an excellent job. Like I said, as the characters got older and they got a little bit more believable. Pacino did the best job of trying to portray Hoffa's, wild, animated, excitable character. But like I said, the only thing that takes away from this movie a little bit is their age. But the acting, A plus. The storytelling, A plus. You know what I'm saying? I love as a historian the historical references and the homages they make. Um, don't want to give away too much of the movie, but two things I liked about the movie, as far as homages is concerned. Um, we all know that Don Rickles was in Casino, and they portray an act. They have an actor who portrays Don Rickles in his mid 1970s peak. Well, I think it was actually early 1970s peak, and I think it was at a birthday celebration for Joe Gallo, who was a mafia boss who had uh, who was ill-fated. And I think that was great because, Rickles passed away, I think, like 3 years ago. And to have an homage or a character devoted to him is a good touch in the movie. And also, there's a character in this movie that Frank Sheeran meets. I think his name is Ferry. And he has the wig and the drawn-on eyebrows. And that character, I can't remember his first name anymore, but the last name was Ferry, is the same character that Joe Pesci portrayed in JFK. So I thought that was very, very interesting. And so I don't want to give away too much in the movie, man. But it also talks about the conflict between Frank Sheeran and his one family, the mafia, and how he tries to shield that from his family. But he doesn't realize that the family that he puts before his family, his actual family, is what's causing the conflict, with his actual family. And he pays a heavy price for that uh, as the movie progresses. He's not seeing what his life is doing to his actual family. And like I said, he pays a heavy price for that at the end. That's all I'm going to say about that. The movie also touches on, I'll just put it like this, man. There's going to be some parts of the movie, there's going to be one part of the movie where you really feel for Frank Sheeran because you have to feel like he's in total anguish at decisions that he has to make. It's a big decision that he has to make. And when he realized that he's going to have to do something, because if he doesn't do it, then he's going to put his family and himself in danger. And at that time, I'm not going to let sit there and lie, man. I got a little moisty eyed, man, because it's a gut wrenching decision that you have to make, in that type of situation. But anyway, I think the movie's great. Is it as good as Goodfellas or Casino? I wouldn't put it quite there, but it's definitely one of the better Scorsese, movies that I've seen in quite some time. You know what I'm saying? I would put it just under those movies, but it's a damn good movie. And considering the age of these actors, this goes to show you how these guys, all of them pushing 80, run circles around most of the actors or the so-called actors that we have today.